right, guys, welcome back to the Metro Waterproofing Anniversary Podcast. Today we're picking up the story. If you're just catching this, go back and listen to episode 1 as Clyde tells us about his early days growing up all the way to the start of Metro Waterproofing, 1972. Listen to episode 2 as Sandra talks about her childhood, her days growing up, the lessons learned, and how God impacted and changed her life, and meeting Clyde. And now we are going to jump right into, guys, it's the early days of y'all's marriage. You're starting a family. You've moved around a little bit, but you found Gwinnett, the 13th home, I think. Is that what you said?
That's
13th
it.
home.
Mm-hmm.
And you're having children too. Now, why don't we start there? And y'all have a young family. I think you're working for Holbrook Waterproofing.
Holbrook Waterproofing.
And so let's start there and pick up the story from there. Clyde, why don't you start us off with kind of setting the scene, working for Holbrook and those early days of starting a family.
Well, I traveled when we lived in Charlotte for about 4 years, and every Monday you'd go to work, you'd have to, just about 99% of the time I'd be gone the whole week. And so they had this job in Georgia, trust company Georgia down on Edgewood, and we'd done spent all the money, and I'd got to be troubleshooter. I just took care of projects that had gone bad, and so they'd always send me to take care of the problems. And so I was sent down to finish that job and get out of Georgia, but I've never been a person that can waste time. And so I would go out and sell these little jobs, and I wasn't selling them like most people put money in my pocket. I was selling them, put money in Holbrook's pocket.
Yeah,
and because I never believed in doing side work and put money in my pocket. Never took a penny in my life. And so Sandra and I decided that, man, moving to Georgia might be all right. So I talked Holbrook into starting an office here. Mm-hmm. And so there I was the general manager, sales manager, operational manager. I had 3 salesmen, me, myself, and I. And Miss Sanders, she was the secretary over in Duluth. We moved right behind John Clancy Hospital, and and so I was working 16 hours a day. And our baby boy Kenneth, the president of Metro Waterproof now, he was about 45 days old when we started Holbrook Waterproofing, and Teresa, she had asthma, and she would just lay down and die on us, and
oh my goodness!
And so it was a struggle. And
so when was Teresa born?
65.
1965.
Okay.
October the 9th, 1965.
Right.
And so we just took them and working with building Holbrook, and before you know it, I had 30-some employees, and so it's got me an estimator, and we started growing, and I decided I better start me a company. So they were starting a Western Electric out there on Jimmy Carter Boulevard, and so we were doing that job, and I went off and bought me a new truck and quit. Well, Holbrook come down and sold me, talked me into going back, and sold me 17% of Holbrook Waterproofing in Georgia. And so we went on, and for a couple more years, I guess it probably about 2 years, and he forgot to mail me my check. The first year he didn't mail me all my money, my 17%. I've never been good at a lot of things, but math ain't one of them. And so the second year I told Sandra, I said, I'm gonna keep up with this money.
Yeah.
And so I kept up with what I was supposed to be paid, and he didn't send me my money the second year, so I told Sandra I'm gonna quit. And so that's when I went up to Decoa, Georgia on a Friday and met a guy on a little teeny job in a chicken factory, $4,200. And so I asked him, I said, I'm thinking about starting my own company. He said, can I do this job? And he said, I don't care who does it, I just need to get this caulking in these joints.
There you go.
And so $4,200, I took my brother Doug, and we sat down at the table in Lawrenceville, and me and him and Sandra And actually, my brother Doug would have owned 10% of Metro Waterproofing. He don't know what a gift that would have been if he'd have put his house up. But he wouldn't put his house up, so he ended up just working for us for 50 years. He's still an employee at Metro Waterproofing at 84 years old.
Wow.
And but we decided a name, and we thought up every name, but I knew the company was going to be big. And so we decided that we would call it Metro because Metro is big.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we call it Metro Waterproofing. And I hired a guy off the street, put them on that job, and drove to Charlotte and resigned. And the rest is history. We started Metro with a $1,400 pickup truck, and a $100 ladder. Me and Doug took 2 befores. Now, $1,400 pickup truck was pretty good, though, because we bought our first new truck in 1972 from Nash Chevrolet for $2,700. So that $1,400 pickup truck was a pretty good truck. But we built the ladder rack out of 2 befores, and that took us about 30 minutes. And they drove on up there to Toccoa, and we started that job. Well, the first month, I sold so much work, we had 8 employees the first month.
Wow.
And owed, now we only had $6,000.
Right.
And so we done spent all the money for labor.
Yeah.
And we bought all the materials on a credit. And so we owed $14,000 or $15,000, and we didn't have a penny. We couldn't even make the payroll.
It's going on faith right there.
I drove to Toccoa and picked up the first check, and we just started from there, and we just kept climbing the ladder like 2 little mountain climbers.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's our God, and we built churches, and we kept working and building St. Edward's, and she and I sang in the choir and worked in the Boy Scouts and coached ball, and Lord, we'd stand around there once in a while right now and figure out how in the world do we do all this. But that's kind of how we got started, on a wing and a prayer.
That's amazing. Sandra, what did you think of those early days? You're having children, you got small kids, you're starting a company. What was going on in your mind back in those days?
Well, I do remember when we first moved here, when he was working with Holbrook Waterproofing. In fact, I worked for them also at a certain time in Charlotte doing some payroll. I worked part-time. But, during that time, the history was, that's when Clyde fell off the building and that story, so we won't go there. But
go back to episode 1 if y'all want to hear that story, because it is an incredible story.
It really is. But anyway, he's always been strong and will-powered, and he always had a goal, and he wanted to always fulfill that goal. But the part that I remember the most is right after he resigned from Holbrook Waterproofing. And we were sitting at the table, and we already discussed it before we got with Doug and about him going into business. And I thought, well, you know what? It's like my daddy always said, if you're going to give that much time to a company and all that effort, you might as well own your own company. Mm-hmm. So he decided to do that, and I supported him. And we got Doug, and we started talking about how we can get this organized and get it moving and get it staffed and how it was going to do. I was excited about it because I felt like Clyde was ready for that.
Right.
He'd already, he didn't graduate from high school, was in military, got his GED, but when we lived in Duluth, he went to college at night. And so I felt like he was prepared to start that. And he had management skills, and I call it people skills. And he knew how to work hard. That was the main thing. A lot of people don't know really how to work hard and give a lot of time, but he knew how to work hard. So the whole thing at the beginning, once that was done and we got it going, he would start work right out in the morning, get up early, and I was raising 3 kids, and they had all just started school. And so I was helping him at home. then all of a sudden it was just growing so fast. He had a part-time estimator that came to the house, and they would stand at the kitchen island and taking off jobs and so forth, and sometimes he'd stay and have dinner with us, but it was a lot going on. So we were, the funny part about the whole thing was we'd had to have a storage place while we lived there. So I'm on a scaffold in the backyard. Now, in this neighborhood, women just didn't do things like that. I'd get up on the scaffold. Daddy had came and started helping him build this, they always call it a barn. It was a storage house, so that was Clyde's language. And getting it going where they have a place to put the lighters and the buckets of material and different stuff, and then the guys would come and load up. It was mostly Clyde loading up and taking it and going on because he was hands-on. Then he was taking off jobs. And so he had, I would say, doing 5 different things at one time. He would labor the job, work on it, but he also had to sell the jobs. He had to read the blue plan. So it was just so much going on. And then I would type up his the estimates and different stuff. So, and then at nighttime, when the kids would go to sleep, we were still working. But it was exciting. We were just full of energy. We were young. And then
it was all yours this time.
Yeah, so then all of a sudden it was like, he was hired more people, and it was time to look for a place. It was just time to move on and look for a place, and that was less than 6 months.
Wow.
And so that's when he came home, and he had found a place, and we went. It was a little house where we are now, and I just had so much fun decorating it. But I had to leave home then and go to work because it was one office girl there, and so. But he was working and all, and so I have to tell you about Clyde. We did a lot of when guys were working, especially out of town. And so we would go up to Mrs. Humphreys, the florist there in Lawrenceville, and Clyde would say, "Oh, by the way, when you're going home, we need to wire some money to some workers. Only 5 minutes." There I am with 3 kids in school, had to run back and forth. And so I finally said, "Clyde, 5 minutes? Oh, it's only 5 minutes." And that 5 minutes was an hour. It was like the time you got there to Lawrenceville, I had to drive into the city, get the money wired, leave there, get back home, go get the kids, and all that kind of stuff. So, but then I was getting the kids off to school, driving up to work, being back home by the time the children got home from school. Right. But, we were young, we were energetic, and we were excited because we had our place. I knew Clyde was at a place of his life that was his dream, to own a business of his own. And I said, well, it's not a business, it's a corporation, you know. So the beauty of it was watching it grow. There was ups and downs. Money was short at times, and so Clyde would have to leave, go pick up the checks, get it back to me so I can get it in the bank so we can make the payroll. Right. And then the same way with the material and different stuff, but somehow all that just always worked together. And it was some tough times during that time at the beginning. A lot of hours.
It's the 1970s, and so construction in the metro Atlanta area was different, and it was just really starting to grow and bloom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we started to grow. We were working on the bank's money all the time. That was the big problem. We were actually working for the bank. We didn't know we weren't working for Metro Waterproofing because all the money went to the bank.
I gotcha. Because you had to actually go get the materials and labor. You had to.
Well, then we got President Carter. Well, we bought this little house down on Alcove Drive. Well, now we own the whole street, or the children do. And but we bought one house, and Holbrook Waterproofing was just down the street. Because I had found that property, it was the best location in Atlanta, still is to this day.
Yeah. To get everywhere.
You can jump on Scott Boulevard, go downtown. You can get on East Ponce, go downtown. You can get on Claremont, 285. I mean,
it's
the perfect location. So all the employees from Holbrook, as I started growing, they just walk. I never asked not one employee to leave them, but every one of them would come up and go to work for me. And so they had to move.
Yeah.
They had to go buy a piece of property somewhere else. But But it was great. And then we got President Carter and 21% interest.
Ooh.
And so we were actually paying $20,000 and $30,000 and $40,000 a month interest to the bank.
Oh my gosh!
And
Yeah,
so-
that's right. That's the late '70s, and you got was that savings and loans and all those kind of things were happening, and you had interest rates going through the roof. Yeah, that was
Well,
crazy.
you think you're making
interest rates.
15% profit, and you're paying the bank 21%. And by the time you got done, I mean, there wasn't no money left. I mean, it was a struggle all the time
They get you trapped in there.
to stay in business.
Yeah, I bet.
But God just blessed us all the time, some way or another. We just keep getting good people, and you got to realize we didn't have no money, so you couldn't go out here and get college graduates. I'd have to go and find people that had 1 or 2 years of college or junior college or something, and had worked in paint companies and different people and then I'd have to train them into waterproofing, and it was a struggle that the person don't really know. My children don't know, because by the time they got there, people were beginning to get educated, and we were hiring better people. And then in 1986, I've always been a pioneer. I've always wanted to change things, and you know that, but America Made movie. And
Well, I want to, before you get to the 1986 there, I think it's good to note, before I forget to say this, that you're starting in a time in waterproofing where that's hands-on training. You have revolutionized certain practices and the ways that you've learned to do things, both from Holbrook and doing it for yourself on a budget. There's not a YouTube where you can learn how to do these things.
No.
There's not an internet. If you don't learn it or invent it, then you don't know it.
And people don't realize that at that time in the 70s, materials was changing from oil-based butyl, thiacol into urethanes.
Okay.
And then later they changed into epoxies and stuff that would set quicker. But we were having all these changes, so I was still working with the manufacturers to change the formulas to get it where you could use it, get it where it would stay. Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, I was the first man on that job. I was standing in the hole where the river runs when we started laying the first waterproofing under the tunnel. We did the whole tunnel.
Wow.
And 77 tractor and trailer loads of waterproofing on that tunnel.
Wow.
And so we were doing Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. I dropped my thought there. I don't remember what.
1986 is where you were taking it. You said, getting into 1986 always been a revolutionary, always been an inventing things.
Yeah, okay. And so we in the south corridor, we put these wide expansion joints. The engineers did. Well, the joints were supposed to have a half an inch movement in 24 hours. So Trimco Manufacturing, they designed a joint. We put it in there. Well, it wasn't 6 months. The whole tile started popping up. The joint started breaking out. So they called us and said it was our problem. Well, I called the manufacturer. We go over and look at it, and so we think maybe there's something to do with the material or workmanship. So we put it in for nothing. Now this joint was 50 foot long at $100 a foot.
Wow.
So it was $5,000 to put this one joint in.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it fell in about 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
So then we decided we better monitor. So we put a monitor on it. The joint was moving in 24 hours, 4.5 inches.
Wow.
The whole South Concourse in Hartsfield-Jackson. And so then they had to start paying us. But because of that problem, we revolutionized wide expansion joints. And we designed them and kept designing them. And we put that joint in 7 times. And it finally put it in and it held. And out of that became expanding joints, web joints, all kinds of different designs came out of that failure of that joint in Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And that's what I did, though. I was a student of revolutionizing, making things better with all these different manufacturers over the years, and it was just a exciting time to see. Because people don't realize if you don't have failure sometimes, you don't never learn nothing. And failure makes you dig into your inner soul, your brain, and create things.
Yeah.
And
sure does.
We kept growing, and Metro kept growing and growing and growing, and then being a pioneer, we had 2 people overdosed on drugs in 85. One overdosed at University of Georgia. One fell off of DeVire University taking drugs on a Saturday morning. And I said, something's got to be done. So that's when I started working to get drug tested in construction. And somebody, they say didn't like that, but anyway, we had this big fire in 86.
86. The fire happens. You get the phone call in the morning.
And the big fire, and that's when we like to lost everything. I mean, we had to put our bed up to start Metro waterproofing. Then we had to, by that time we'd accumulated a lot of property, and Sandra and I, we didn't owe the world but $52,000 a day before the fire, and before you know it, we owed millions and millions of dollars. And that's when we started paying the bank $50,000 and $60,000 a month interest.
Goodness gracious.
Just to survive, and nobody thought we were going to survive. But God had another plan, because he taught us to work on a cash basis. We couldn't buy a dollar's worth of nothing. And so out of that paying cash, we learned to be a cash company. And it took, people think you can overcome a problem in a day or 6 months or a year. It took 9 years.
Wow.
Before we got back to where we were the day of the fire.
9 years. Almost a whole decade.
And I was working 18 hours a day, and Sandra was holding down the house and holding down the fort. And I was putting in 18 hours a day. We didn't even know where we was at, really.
Because how old were the kids at that time when the fire happened, Sandra?
Well, when the fire happened, Michael was in college. He just started college at that time. And also, Teresa had just started working there at Metro not too long. And also, I think Scooter was there.
Yeah, Scooter was working.
Kenny was in high school. But you know, I just always felt like, and like Clyde says, during that time, before the big fire, you know, sometimes stress, when bad things happen, it brings opportunity. And you have to look at it face up. The one thing that I have to say, I never forget the morning of the fire when we went down there. And you see your building to the grounds and all the work that had been done. But I'll tell you one thing that I'll never forget, and it's always been in my heart, because I was always the one in charge of the books and the billing, sending out all of that. And that was the point when I was first started training Teresa, is that the girl that we had hired had been there. She was in tears, and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Miss Strickland, I know you told me, I remember it, you told me to make sure that I always put those books in a fireproof cabinet. I left the main book on my desk. I did not put it." So we knew it was going to be burned to the ground. That was our lifeline. Well, when the fireman said we can finally go in, I remember going in to the office, and I looked down where the water was, and I saw the book. I picked the book up. I didn't really open it deeply, but I could see some printing. So immediately we went over to the warehouse, which was the roofing division, which had not burned to the ground. That was next door. We had a roofing division at the time. We spread all the sheets. That was our accounts of all our contractors that we had business with. It told what the contract amount was, the change order. I kept the books. The change order was, and how much work had been performed, how much had been paid, and also what was due. We took every bit of that and we transposed it on the ground, got it all. That's what saved all of that, because at that point,
Wow.
we didn't know,
Wow.
unless we had the books,
Right.
what was owed.
Mm-hmm.
We knew mentally,
Mm-hmm.
but we had this great, because we had a lot of jobs going on,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of government jobs, big jobs going on, but we got it all done. But I have to say to you that was, Clyde and I probably got less than 5 hours sleep, because once we got home, that wasn't the end of it. I mean, I had a family I had to take care of, but I have to remember I was real involved in a women's club the day of the fire. We had a foster parents dinner. That was that night.
Wow.
And I remember when I went home, I went to that dinner and helped serve those families, because we both said life has to go on. What can we do? We just have to keep going and keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
But before the fire, and I think where the strength was with our business, with mine and Clyde's life and the devotion to one another, when we first started the business, Nathan, it was like the difference in the children when they finally was being in charge and moving in and taking charge, they never had to go through this day, what we had to go through. They never had to worry about going out of town, leaving their family. Clyde had to leave me and the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if wives could understand that today, but I think when you love one another, you have to understand your spouse, what their dreams are and the responsibilities are, because I came up with a hard-working family. Clyde was getting up after the fire at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he was there working, setting up his workers. But the whole thing was during that time, when things got tough before the fire, I remember we had a big job going on. It was running in the hole, big time. Clyde takes off, gets his work clothes, and he heads out to Florida. And he's running the job, trying to bring it where it'd have a profit. He was gone probably that time, a month, Clyde?
About 10 weeks.
10 weeks, a long time.
Yeah.
But he was gone, and the office we kept working. But he brought it up, because he knew how to do that. He knew how to work it and get the men moving, getting the job to come in to the black.
I hired 25 men on a job the first day, and then I hired 25 out of the labor pool the next day.
Wow.
Then neither one of them, I had one man on a job that knew nothing. God sent me a guy from Alaska.
Wow.
One of the guys that I hired out of the labor pool owned a roofing company in Alaska. And so I put him in charge of keeping up with all these 25 people. And we had like 5 or 6 crews. We were doing the Grand Cypress Resort in Orlando. Massive job.
Wow.
And we were $350,000 in the hole.
Whew.
And I brought it out of the hole in 10 weeks. And I did go to the hospital one time, overexhaustion. But I brought it out of the hole and ended up making a little bit of profit on it. But I was putting 90,000 miles a year on one car when I was building Metro Waterproofing, along with coaching the boys. All of them took piano. Mike took art, trumpet. They all played baseball, football, basketball,
We had a lot
softball.
going on.
Yeah.
And
You were busy.
And I was at near every game. I coached for 9 years.
Wow.
And I'd coach ball and get in the car and drive all night. I'd drive all night and put 90,000 miles. Some weeks I'd put 2,000 miles on a car. I'd burn up a new Lincoln every year. And it was, people don't know, building a business, you
It's
got
tough.
you got to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
And
And you got to have a strong bond with your family also. That's number one, is that bond. You have
Right.
to understand that people need to work, got to work. You can't be lazy. And I think even when Clyde fell, that his movement was, I got to get back to work. I got to get back to work.
Right.
You got to provide for the family. You
Yep.
got to have food. You got to pay your bills, and that's always been our priority. That I have to say, every bill that we ever owed had to be paid. And during our lifetime, we would lend people money, and then they wouldn't pay us, but we would just say, okay, drop it. But I also know, according to the Bible, it says you pay your debt. Mm-hmm. We always paid our debt. That was always number one. Pay your bills. Make sure they get paid. Sometimes it may not be paid on time, but one thing that I would do, or Clyde would do mostly, is to say, I can't pay all of this time, but I can give you this much, and I guarantee you this much. And people that was in business that sold us material understood. Even our bankers understood. We had a great banker one time that we had to borrow money. This was after the fire, and I would go down with Clyde to the bank where we get another loan. And back then, it was like the banker knew Clyde's character and knew that by lending that money, you wouldn't lend it to just anybody. If you weren't a working man and put yourself in it, well, we got the loan. And that's how we really survived Metro, is because of a loan that we had received to keep us moving, to keep us going. And if we didn't have that, we would have never made it. So we had to learn to depend on people, but we also realized we had to pay them back, and that was important.
So we had to put that bed up again.
And
when we built the churches, that's another thing. When we helped build St. Edward's, we put our house up. Mm-hmm. Then we go to Snellville, we start St. Matthew's. We put our house up to build St. Matthew's again.
Wow.
And I think God looked after us and protected us because we always wanted to take care of his interest. Mm-hmm. And because his interest came first in our life. And we taught the children these values as we were coming along, and they were playing all these footballs and pianos and stuff. Saturdays and Sundays, me and them boys would be out on the job working, and they can tell you some stories about, they knew how to work.
I'm sure we will hear those stories. They're coming in.
They're good workers.
They're coming in. They're going
dedicated.
to talk about some of this.
We were blessed with 3 good kids. We got 2 great daughter-in-laws who are very supportive of their spouses, and a terrific son-in-law. So, and then we've got all these grandchildren. We're in our 4th generation right now of children, and love every one of them dearly. But
so you have grandkids working for the company now?
Yes, we're in the 3rd
That's
generation,
amazing.
and we all got the 4th sometimes that goes up there and that loves to go and be with their papa, and so cool. I think they will be working there in the 4th generation, but 3rd generation's there now.
Oh my gosh, that's so incredible. That's awesome. Well, we got to the 80s, we got past the fire. You guys build back Metro brick by brick over time, 9 years. From 86 to 96, something pretty big happens in the city of Atlanta. The Olympics get announced that they're coming, and every construction job starts to open up across the city. They got to rebuild the city.
Absolutely.
And so I'm guessing that the phone started ringing.
Well, I have to tell you, Clyde was getting ready to go to work that morning. We were in the bedroom. We had the television on, and getting dressed, getting ready to go to work. And all of a sudden, Clyde walks over. We hear where it's announced, because we were waiting to where the Olympics going to be.
Yeah.
Atlanta, Georgia. And it was like, oh my gosh, we were just like we were just giving thanks. It was like the best thing that could have ever happened. And that's
Olympics is what paid off our debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it is a miracle. And I know that you have something that you taught me of just keeping that winning spirit, and it's like having a winning ball team, and it's like when everybody's winning, things are good because everybody's got that winning spirit.
Good.
When that was announced in '96, I remember just everybody losing their minds.
We did,
because old little Atlanta. It wasn't hot Atlanta. It wasn't Atlanta. It wasn't any of that yet. This is the first thing that really the whole world was coming, and so. People had to get to looking nice. They had to clean up some buildings, build Centennial Park. I mean, there's things that were built in that era that we still got out there
today.
Yeah, and it was just a large, the whole world
And
was
look at
coming.
Georgia Tech, you know.
Yeah, Georgia Tech, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Olympic Village, the dorms, what Georgia State
they were
has
building
done.
stuff everywhere.
I mean, it's crazy. So the phone starts ringing, you guys get to work, and that helps pay off the debt of the company, and the 90s are a good decade.
In
Yep.
1995, I walked in the bank, paid off the debt, and because Olympia started building, when we got the word, about 92 is when we really started doing a lot of work.
Wow.
And so it was just unbelievable. And in 95 is when I started teaching junior achievement because I wanted to teach kids about business, and so I joined the junior achievement and started teaching. And in 97 and 98, they picked me volunteer teacher of the year in the state of Georgia for junior achievement. Think about this: a little old boy didn't even graduate high school, being the volunteer teacher of Georgia, the whole state of Georgia.
That's amazing.
Think about that. It blows. Sometimes I get so I'll just cry of how God has blessed me.
That's amazing.
Sometimes I woke up. I mean, I'll be riding along sometime right by myself, and tears will run down my face of how good God's been to me.
That's good. That's good. Oh my gosh. So at what point does the kids are working for the company in the 90s? And then at what point, help me understand, when did Ken come in as president after his college?
Well, he graduated. Mike came in 91, and Mike kind of changed the whole company.
Okay.
He just walks down to my office after he'd been working about 3 months, and he said, "Dad said, everybody works different than you work." He said, "I want to learn to work like you work because you make the kind of profit that you save and we meet. But I want to learn what you're doing."
Yeah.
And so I took Mike under my wing, and he listened. Before you know it, our profit starts building. And then everybody's profit starts pulling up. They realize that somebody else could do it beside the president.
Wow. Okay.
I always made 25, 30% net profit. And the company would be making 5 and 6% and 7% and all that. And Mike came to work. Within no time, he started making 20% net profit. And so then everybody else started pulling in. And then Kenny graduated in 91, and he came to work in 91. And so then Mike and me started training Kenny. And so he started learning the company. Well, by that time, as they started growing, I started trying to letting them do more. Because I've been a person, my success in life is I always wanted to give somebody my job. Because I wanted to find another job bigger.
Right.
And so I would always just give every job to somebody else. I didn't care who got the glory. All I wanted to do is get another job.
Yeah.
So I could build another something. And so
that's great.
They started taking over, and I was letting them take over. And I just took me a few good jobs that I loved to work for. And it was like working for your friends. And I'd do a couple $1 million a year, and I was just happy as a jaybird, and enjoyed seeing them grow. And so we always hired George S. May Company out of Chicago to help when we would get to a plateau. I tell people, when you get to a plateau, you got to figure out how to get to that next plateau and climb up that mountain.
Yeah.
And so we'd always hired George S. May Company to come in and help us step up them plateaus. And I tell you, Teresa and Scooter too, I have to give them a pat on the back, because they were always in the fire, and they was always working hard and always just supporting the company. And but we hired George S. May Company in 99, and they came in, and we wanted to transition the company and pick a new president. And so they came in, and we had a years of transition there where we would put people in charge of they'd be what they call the acting president. When we go on vacation and go out of town for 30 days or whatever. So they'd be the acting president, and the cream just raised to the top. I guess it was all God, because God wanted our company to be a godly company. We were always a good company and always talked about God and all, but we hadn't really got Bible study in Metro Waterproofing, and Kenny was always been. We actually thought he might be a priest or something, because he was always angelical. And so for some reason or another, me and Sandra, we just prayed about it, and we decided to make Kenneth the president. And because there were 5 people that could be president, and he had at least time in grade,
right,
and all that, but it was just God's will that we make him president, because the first week after we made him president, he started having Bible study, and the company just gelled around his leadership.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of how the transition went from at that period, and they all working together, and we run Metro Waterproofing with a board, a board of directors, and then Michael and Kenny and Scooter and Teresa. They just kind of executed down, and we got unbelievable employees.
Man.
Our family, you talk about our family, but we got several other families that have been there 50 years too.
Wow.
And we got all these different families, and we got Hispanics that their whole families were there. And we got African Americans, their whole families were there. At one time, we had people from 15 countries working for Metro Waterproofing, and there are all these little families that built Metro Waterproofing, and they still are today. And I think that's the core value of our company, is God and family, is what has made Metro Waterproofing great.
All right. Well, guys, what an incredible journey. We've gotten through the first chapter of Metro Waterproofing, if you will, and we are going to learn 2 things in the coming episodes. First off, we are going to give the current day leadership, all of these kids that you've been hearing about growing up, a chance to talk about growing up in Metro and what that was like, talking about how they came into the company and what it's like today and everything that they've been doing. And then we're going to learn that other job that Clyde found when he phased up, as he likes to say. What was next for Clyde and Sandra Strickland? Keep watching and you'll find out.